Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Abilene People, the podcast here on bigcountryhomepage.com, where we guarantee you the most interesting people in Abilene or your money back. Today, no money back, the executive director of Frontier Texas, Mr. Jeff Salmon.
That's me.
How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
So you're really a bigwig, like in the museum, the museum community, the historical community. What does your wife call you, Mr. Taylor County?
Oh yeah, when
guy?
I go to my Taylor County Historical Commission job, she goes, "Oh, you got to go be the king of because there's a judge and of Taylor County. So what am I, the mayor or the king?" Yeah, she jokes with me about that because it's a title of all I get to do is run some meetings, there's, and everything, and do some extra work. Well, volunteer work, by the way.
We're going to put it to the test because I have a few little trivia questions I'm going to ask you in a bit about Abilene and Taylor County.
Quiz.
Pop quiz time. Yes,
All
indeed. But let's, you're from Abilene, so the question, how'd you get to Abilene doesn't quite apply. But how did you get to today? Because you're born in Abilene, went to Abilene High.
You know what? Full disclosure, be careful here. I'm going to lose get my Texas card revoked by some of you, especially, here I am a director of a history museum, Texas History Museum. I am not a native Texan.
That's okay. You got here
6 kids in my family.
Yeah.
My family went up to New York to do church work for the Churches of Christ and took 4 Texan kids up there. And my brother Danny and I were born in New York. And so as we were growing up there, our siblings harassed us, loved to joke at different times. Well, you guys aren't Texans. If we would do something stupid, they would go like, "Oh, that's because y'all aren't Texans." And so it was a funny joke with them. But when I was 5 years old, we moved back here to Abilene. I started first grade at Taylor Elementary. But as soon as I got here, my mom did something really great. She said, "Oh, I know your brothers and were harassing you about not being a Texan, but you're here, you're a Texan now." And so I've always been one of those people where if you want to be a Texan and you showed up, I don't care if you showed up yesterday and you are contributing and this is where you want to be and you want to call it home, you just say, "I'm a Texan." Also, you can be a Texan also.
I love it.
So, yeah. So anyway, so we got here. I got here early, as fast as I could, as some people would say, and grew up here in Abilene, had a great life.
And you went to Taylor Elementary.
I did.
Were you in the choir and did you sing that very famous Taylor Elementary song, "I'm a Long Tall Texan"?
Well, of course, we sang the song as part of it. And I can sing the whole "Hurrah for the Taylor Trojans." In fact, I think I sang that this morning a little bit to a guy from the Parks Department, and we realized we both went to Taylor, and we sang "Hurrah for the Taylor Trojans." But on that song, "Long Tall Texan," I sang along with the choir, but I was not the tallest Texan of that day. There was one other in my class at the time, a guy named Mark McMillan, and Mark had me by a good solid half an inch. Mark was a big old boy.
I was expecting you to say this kid named Shaquille O'Neal.
No.
Because you're a tall guy.
No, I'm a tall guy. But you know what's funny? My brother Danny, that was tall. He did get to do it one time, Long Tall Texan, but he had John Chalk right above him and taller than him. So anyway, yes, I was in the Taylor choir with Miss Drennan, and it was great. What a great school to grow up going to.
It's kind of legendary.
It is very legendary.
If you're local Abilene, you know that, and it's
Right.
legendary, especially if you're northeast side of Abilene.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun thing, a great school to grow up in.
You went to Abilene High.
I went to Franklin and then Abilene High.
And then you matriculated through your post-high school academic career through Abilene Christian, and then went to Denton.
I went to ACU for enough years to where most people could have gotten an undergraduate degree and most of a master's degree. And I didn't get either of those. I was, part of it was that I was trying to work my way through college, paying for it on my own, being raised in a single parent household. My mom was a second grade teacher here in Abilene, and that wasn't a lot for raising 6 kids. And so, I was going slower while I was waiting tables, mowing yards, doing odd jobs, whatever I could find. And so it took a little bit longer. And
And
also,
you know what? You
Yeah.
remember those times with a smile on your face.
I
You're
do.
smiling.
No, I do.
They're great
I love
times.
it. No,
Yeah.
it was so good
Yeah.
for me. Young men need heavy loads. They need responsibilities. And that's one thing that my mom did a great job of teaching all of her kids. In fact, it's funny. We were just talking about that some of my siblings live pretty far away. And like my oldest brother lives in Norway. The next one lives in Wisconsin. The Danny that you know lives in London, England. And we were talking about what in the world of all our kids, our family moving away. And we said, well, mom always had this expression when she was getting on to us to study. She would say, you better study hard because if you don't, you're not going to go far in life. And we took that as maybe that you're supposed to study hard and go as far away from Abilene as you can. And so that is something all of us pretty much did
great.
to some degree. I did leave ACU for a little bit and went to Europe and went and worked in England because my brother Danny was there. And so I did that, but it took me a while. And then I eventually came back and did some more school and then realized that the University of North Texas would suit me well to finish out my degree. And I graduated from there, got married. My wife, Deirdre, and I got married and lived in the Metroplex and started it's where we started raising kids and lived there for 12 years.
Now I want to talk about the Metroplex because you had some interesting jobs there before you came to Abilene. But I want to quickly do a quick note on your mom.
Yeah,
I happen to have known you, and as you've mentioned, one of your brothers. I probably knew the other siblings too, but your mom is one of the most precious souls that ever graced God's green grass.
Yeah.
Wonderful human being.
Yeah.
I just
She
thought
really was.
she was just incredible.
She really was amazing. She had this thing that she could make anybody she was with feel like they were the most important person. She gave the people her full attention. And so she taught second grade, and especially when I came back here. And then it was one of the reasons we moved back here, actually, was we wanted to raise our kids here. And Nana was here, and we would get to have our kids closer to their grandmother. Unfortunately, after I'd only been at the job about 6 months, we're just getting ready to open the museum. She died unexpectedly, just really devastating to me. But it was interesting over that time, and to be honest, over the 20 years since then, so many people came and said, your mom was my second grade teacher. Of all the teachers I had, K through 12, she was my absolute favorite. And then the other thing that was odd was women. Lots of women would come up to me and say, well, I don't know if you know this, but your mom was my best friend. And I thought, oh, okay. Well, I knew that you knew her, but that's, and then another woman and another, and dozens of women would say, your mom was my best friend. And I asked one of those ladies at one point, I said, how could somebody have that many best friends? And she said, your mom just had this gift.
Wow.
Amazing woman.
Wow.
Yeah. Carolyn Salmon.
Yeah. She's a real, very special soul.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, as a footnote, I know that you're personally good friends with our friend Derek Hood.
Yeah, that's right.
And Derek would always say that he was one of my mom's students when my mom taught elementary school, and my mom and your mom knew each other, and it just means a lot because Derek will talk about my mom. I don't know, just means a lot. But
it does. Moms are amazing, and it's great when you have a great one like that.
So you were in the Metroplex. You and Deirdre are married there. That's where you're having kids,
Right.
and you're kind of in a niche career because you're in the tourism industry, and
Yeah.
you did that for the city of Plano,
Right.
which is just it's what a silly joke. I was just going to say Plano City for tourism, but forget it.
No, it
and
was
then
interesting. Yeah.
Fort Worth,
Right.
Which not that Plano is not interesting, but Fort Worth.
No, Fort Worth has product, is what
Really,
they say in the
really
business.
is interesting.
They had so many things. So I got into the business because after I got out of North Texas, I was just looking for anything that would pay well. And I got a job with the Easter Seal Society in Dallas. They hired me and trained me to be a meeting planner and plan and run medical conferences for them. And I did well enough with that where I got some success and was working with a lot of hoteliers. And then I started noticing these convention and visitors bureaus that were trying to get me to bring business to their town. And I thought, that's fascinating that there's people whose job is to sell and promote their town. And I thought, that's odd. I kind of immediately thought about Abilene and thought, now, how in the world would I do that for Abilene? What in the world would I promote? So I got the job in Plano, and it was a hard sell in some ways. I developed a sports market there, though, youth sports primarily.
Oh, in fact,
and
that's a huge
developed it
destination.
huge for them, right?
That's incredible. So I'm sure you had a team, but you're responsible for that because that's a big
I
deal in
will
Plano.
say that at the time I started there, there was almost nothing going on in that. There was one big soccer tournament. That was it. I was just there at the right time where they had overdeveloped their parks department and all their facilities and some privately run volleyball, basketball facilities. There was lots of availability for those facilities to be used for other things. Right after the Atlanta had hosted the Summer Olympics in '96, I went up to Colorado Springs to the U.S. Olympic headquarters and just started walking in, knocking on doors, like saying, "Hey, I'm from Dallas." I wouldn't even start with saying I'm from Plano, Texas. I would say I'm from Dallas, and we've got all these great facilities. Do you want to bring a youth sports event or something like that to town? And it was just the right place. I was aggressive and good at it, and it worked well. So we developed that whole entire sports market for Plano. And so I was really proud of the success there. And then I had a little stint as a museum director in the town of Addison. I ran an aviation museum called the Kavanaugh Flight Museum. That was a great about year and a half experience.
And by the way, if somebody doesn't know about that museum,
well,
that's a big, well, I don't know, big is the right word. It's a very significant museum.
Well, it's a significant collection. Unfortunately, that they did close the museum.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they closed the museum last year.
So what have they done with all of those?
Well, the aircraft are being taken to air shows and things like that. And they always had. That was part of my job, was promoting those to be taken and hired for air shows and things like that.
So do they fly them in and out of Meacham? Is that what they do?
No, it's out of Addison Airport.
So they moved. I remember going.
There is one. There's another museum there is one at Meacham.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's the one I've been to.
There's 5 aviation museums in DFW alone. So that's
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm slow on the take here. So you were in Addison at a location
at the Kavanaugh. Big, beautiful collection of warbirds, and did that for a little bit. I worked on, and I was served on their tourism board in Addison, and then found out that Fort Worth was looking for a tourism director, and they brought me in over there. And so I spent 4 years in Fort Worth as the director of tourism. And then eventually they actually added sports to my title as director of tourism and sports marketing. And
so you were in Fort Worth after Sundance Square became a thing.
Oh, when I got there, Texas Motor Speedway had just opened on the north end of town. The Bass Hall had just opened. We had instituted daily cattle drives through the stockyards, and then Sundance Square was just stunningly great. And then big expansions. Every of those 4 years, big things everywhere. The expansions of the Modern Art Museum in Fort Worth, and then the Kimball had an expansion, and the Fort Worth Zoo had an expansion, and it was just a great time.
Ballpark it for me. Is this about 1999?
Yeah, I started in '99 and was there until 2003. Yeah.
So I'm gonna quickly tell you a story about the cattle drive through the stockyards.
Yeah.
So my wife and I had moved to Fort Worth. We had 2 young children, and for my son's first dog, we connected somehow with this sweet lady up in the River Oaks area of Fort Worth, and she raised blue heelers, and we got a blue heeler. And Patch was such a great blue heeler. Sounds like a joke, but it was absolutely true. As he grew up, he would herd our children around our backyard, and they could not even go play.
Right.
Because Patch would make them go wherever he wanted them to go. And it was really hysterical. Amazing. It was an amazing thing.
Isn't that the official dog breed of Texas, I believe?
I think so, maybe. Yeah. But let me tell you, it was the official breed of Fort Worth because Patsy, the breeder, Patsy Papajohn, she says, well, you know what? I've got somebody that just called me. I know a place for Patch. My point is, long story, stealing your time here. Patch was the first dog that herded the Longhorns.
Really?
In the Fort Worth 150-year celebration, Longhorn Stampede out of the stockyards. That's awesome. Every time on TV you saw a blue heeler, we would say, there's Patch.
That's amazing.
My kids trained him.
You know, the thing that we did there though in Fort Worth was that we looked around and we noticed that the tourists that we were bringing in were a bit frustrated with the product with, well, okay, there's the stockyards, but if you go to the stockyards most days, there's some Western wear stores. At the time, there was Western wear stores and some bars. Billy Bob's was amazing, you know, and there's White Elephants, there's some saloon stuff, but people are like, well, I don't go to bars and, you know, I don't need to buy that many, you know, I don't need to buy 3 cowboy hats. And so people were frustrated that there wasn't more to it. And the little museums that were there were very small. There was a Stockyards Cattle Exchange Museum, and then they opened one that was a wagon museum, but it wasn't very satisfying to people. And so the cattle drive twice a day really gave something that people could just see that they were not going to see anywhere else. And that program at the time, I remember that whole first year of 99 into 2000, everybody was like, that's going to fail. There's no way we're going to be able to sustain that. Well, somebody's going to get killed any day now by a longhorn stampeding them. Because frankly, there had been some cattle drives in other cities where people did get hurt. There was one in Dallas where some people got hurt because they lost control of their cattle.
Became fabulously popular.
But it's still going today. And I'm very proud of being a part of making sure that was a success, even though I didn't start it.
I happened to have just a couple of weeks ago been in the stockyards, interestingly enough, and was there for an expo that I just personally attended. And anyway, long story short, just a great place. I couldn't believe the crowd. It was a Saturday in late September, and it was packed.
And if you look around the crowds there, you'll see people from all over the world.
I was leaving my expo, and I started talking to this person. I was going to give them my wristband. Thought, well, you know, save them the $10. They don't have to pay to get in, which is probably the terrible thing to do. But I thought they couldn't understand me because they spoke German. They were from Germany.
Right. Germans love Texas cowboy culture, not just they're fascinated with it.
Okay, so you're in Fort Worth, and then eventually you come back to Abilene to direct the Frontier Texas complex museum.
The credit goes really to Bob Nutt here in Abilene, who still works for Zachary Associates, H.C. Zachary. H.C. Zachary was the person who put Frontier Texas together, had the vision for it, went out and raised the private funds to do it, go out and worked with the city to get some grant money to build it. And
did H.C., is he the guy that put the buffaloes on the pole?
And he worked with me on that. Yeah, he did. That was his idea as well. All the great ideas come from H.C.
Well, but you gotta say that at some point somebody had to say, Jeff, H.C., this is just nuts. We'll put a buffalo on a pole. How many are we going to put up there?
That's right. Yeah.
And yet, there, right. People love it.
Well, so the thing about H.C. is he can envision things that most people can't. And then secondarily, some of us can imagine things and then we can't get it done. H.C. is this kind of person who can see very complicated projects in their totality on the front end and then work towards it. And he did a great job of building a museum at Frontier Texas that was very unique. But they were the board of directors, they created it, it's a nonprofit organization has its own board of directors. And that board of directors was looking to hire an executive director. And they started by looking at kind of your typical historians and then realized that when they asked really detailed questions about budgeting and what experience do you have marketing to tourists, that kind of fell apart. And they realized that they were worried that was needed more than historians. And so they kind of took a long time getting somebody lined up. In fact, it was getting close to 6 months before the museum was going to open, and they still didn't have a single staff member. They didn't have a director. Bob Nutt was in Fort Worth on business, stopped into the Fort Worth Convention and Visitors Bureau because he knew there was 3 of us that had ties to ACU. And he just stopped in to see us and talk to us about it and see if we had somebody or if we were interested or if we knew somebody who might come take this job. And so he told us all about it. And I could tell that is going to be a product that tourists are going to like. I know tourism. I knew what tourists wanted to see, and what they described from HC's vision, what was being built, was something that would work. So I knew that. So then I tried for weeks and probably a couple of months, actually, trying to get friends in the industry to consider going out to Abilene. And at the time, I was not really interested in it.
At first you didn't think that's me.
Oh, no, not at all.
Oh, okay.
I was, to be honest, the job I had in Fort Worth was a higher paying, much more kind of, had a much clearer,
Plus Fort Worth, what, the
yeah.
15th, 16th largest city in the nation.
Yeah. So it didn't even at the very beginning, it didn't even cross my mind that I might consider it. But eventually I was talking to the board and HC, trying to find people. And, you know, I sent 2 people who came out and interviewed that they were interested in, who frankly said, I don't want to live in Abilene. I've never lived in a town that small, you know, or that isolated. And they just didn't want to, they passed it over. And eventually it started getting in my mind that maybe we wanted to raise our kids there. And the board did a good job. The board chairman at that first board of directors was an amazing woman named Billy Proctor Shaw.
Oh, wow.
And Billy started talking to me about it, and said, you know, why wouldn't you come to your hometown and do this? What do we have that, or what do we not have? And, you know, she would go through things. And then HC talked to me, and I had always respected HC. I'd known him growing up. I was in school and in Bible class with his daughter Holly, and so I admired HC and thought that, you know, I respected him. And so he started talking to me about it. But I'll tell you who closed the deal was a member of the board who was at the time the assistant city manager at Abilene, Kathy Merrill. I don't know if you knew Kathy.
I don't know Kathy.
And Kathy,
how did she close the deal?
She came into town for an interview, and she said, Jeff, I've looked over your experience. You're doing an amazing job for other cities. Wouldn't it mean so much more to be doing that for a town that is also called my hometown? And she said, and your mom's here. Don't you feel like you might have more obligations towards your mom as she's aging? And she said this very odd phrase. She said, don't pass that up. You might regret passing that up. And it was kind of more in relationship to my mom than anything else. Wow. And that closed the deal.
And you wouldn't have known at the time how what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know how
I had no idea. My mom was 72. Yeah, I had no ideas that I only had 6 months with her.
Yeah.
And it was interesting too, because when I took the job September 1st, 2003, the museum was going to open in April. We were struggling to sell our house in DFW. And so I was kind of commuting and spending most of my time living with my mom, but it was fun. For many of those first like 3 or 4 months, it was just me and mom. I was living back with my mom. We were going out to eat, you know, we'd be at Town Crier, and it was fun. It was really great.
Were you there on Washington Boulevard still, or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Same place.
Right over by ACU, right over by Taylor Elementary. And so it was great that I got that time with my mom. It was a lot of fun. And then the kids got here, and it was great. They were loving having grandma there.
Well, you know, I can understand how somebody who has not lived in Abilene or doesn't have an appreciation like you did and like you do for Abilene might think, it's just, you know, it is in the middle of nowhere. You know, I don't know that I'd enjoy living there. But because my wife and I have lived in the largest metropolitan areas in Texas.
Yeah.
Let's see, 12 years in Houston, which is her home, right, and then 14 in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And we absolutely love the lifestyle and the pace in Abilene. Yeah. Now, sometimes we get caught in the rush minute, and it'll throw us for a curveball, but, you know, it's not like sitting in traffic for the hour and a half just to get 10 miles in North Houston.
Yeah. And there's something else too about raising kids here. You know, when I started the job, my kids were ages 2, 4, 6, and 8. And the logistics of living in North Dallas, you know, is complicated just by distances, like you mentioned. And also there's not as many people with a sense of community. And so, you know, a lot of people, the only way they find community is through kind of 3 things in big cities. They typically through their kids' schools tends to be a place where they congregate, and then the sports teams, things like that, and then some people through a church. It's common places, but other than that, it's very hard for people to connect with other families. Here in Abilene, we immediately saw there were still neighborhoods where kids were out on the streets, out around the neighborhood, that very quickly everybody knew who our kids were. Our kids expected that if they were at the grocery store, people would say, "Oh, y'all are those Salmon kids," and I loved that aspect of it, just this sense of community, and more importantly, that the community tended to seem to have a responsibility towards my kids and vice versa.
Yeah,
that was
cool.
And so there was just a cultural thing here that I definitely didn't sense in Dallas.
Yeah,
I didn't sense that at all. I sensed it a little bit in Fort Worth. Fort Worth, as you and I think we agree, is just a big version of Abilene.
It is,
but a little bit too big sometimes. But
it is.
Yeah, so this has been a great place. I think my family was very blessed to get to raise them here in this town.
And you've really been a eyewitness to the renaissance of Abilene's downtown area.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And not just the downtown on the north side of the tracks, but the Soda District and everything that Tim Smith has done.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about Frontier, Texas, and then I want to challenge you with some Taylor County and Abilene trivia.
All right,
that ought to be a lot of fun. So tell us about Frontier, Texas, and you've got something new happening there, either about to or is happening. So tell us about that.
Let me first explain what it specifically was that HC built. When HC was imagining this place, he thought there are a bunch of the most iconic stories of the American West that intersect legitimately, historically, right here on top of where Abilene is. That there was the stories of the Indians, the tribal groups fighting each other right around here, then them fighting with as Mexico and Spain came in, the struggles of that pushed right up into our area. But then when Texas becomes a state, they immediately start bringing in the U.S. Army to protect settlers and to help push back the indigenous people that were here. That took place right along here. So a line of forts, and then cattle drives legitimately came right through here, heading up to market. And then the railroad coming through, of course, is the establishment of Abilene. And HC said, those are real stories and there's real people behind those. And instead of looking at it kind of the way that most museums do, where you're just going to get some artifacts, put some labels on those and a little bit of narrative, that traditional model, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to build more of an entertainment center in a way that was very historically accurate, but that was more in the space that Hollywood movies are in, or great novels, like Lonesome Dove, Larry McMurtry, something like that, than in the space of academia, and just, that's going to enrich me to go to that museum. And so he made a few key decisions. He said, I want us to find a way to present characters telling their stories as naturally as they can. And he had seen a technology when he was traveling in England. He'd seen a display where there was, I think, a Globe Theater, or Shakespeare on the Globe Theater. And it was some small scale where this hologram of Shakespeare would go out on the stage and talk and stuff. And it was something, it was small scale, little person. And he figured out a little bit about that and then asked if that could be done life size. And he got with some great exhibit developers that he said, I believe that can scale. Can you do it? And they said, we think we can do that. And so what that ended up doing was the main exhibits at Frontier, Texas over the past 20 years. It's kind of a winding path where you go into these different sets, almost like Hollywood movie sets, where this character is going to appear in front of you, life size, look everyone in the eye and tell you their personal story. They're just going to tell you things from about their life. Like I'm here. I just told you some things about my life. You think I'm here, don't you? And you and
really weird.
You and I are having
You're actually a holographic image this whole time. Hey, see, he did have a vision.
Amazing.
It's fantastic.
It's amazing.
No, but it is amazing.
But it is. It is something, and it's fascinating because actually, if there were three people across the table from me right now, I would talk to one, and then I would talk to you, and talk to you. The strange thing about the hologram technology, like staring at your television set, is everybody in the room sees them staring at them, and so everybody standing in front of these holograms has this emotional connection to these stories and different characters, because it was built around kind of all of the different broad types, not all different broad types, but most of the different types of people who were the early settlers to this region. And they tell you their story, and it's emotional, and people kind of, I think, connect to those stories. And those stories are not what you think oftentimes. If you listen carefully to those stories, and they're fascinating, most of them could be categorized as refugees. Almost all of them came here not because it was like, well, I just need another vacation home somewhere and I'm going to, come out here and have a second home. No. This was, I am struggling to survive with my family somewhere else, and I need to find a place where I can survive and thrive. And that's almost all of them did that.
And that search for survival was incredibly risky.
Oh, very risky. Yeah.
So many people died in the journey. And I think I told you earlier, but before we began, I know I told you, but the people watching the podcast don't know that I told you. So I told him before we began about my friend from Washington, D.C., who's a native Italian who's traveled the world. She has access to the best museums in the world all the time, and routinely, I think, goes and attends. When she was in Abilene and she went to Frontier, Texas, Nancy Lyle set her up with a ticket. She went. She said, man, that's one of the best experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, it's just done well. Like everything that H.C. Zachary ever puts his hand to, it was just done at a quality level that just shocked people. Early on, I had a visit from a group of guys, they were being kind of coy about who they were. They said, we work for a little tech company. And could you explain to us and show us some details about how your holograms work?
All right, who was it?
And I said, sure. And it's no secret, nothing confidential at all. We show people, we had already been showing everybody. We'd already showed people from the Alamo, but these guys said, oh, that's how you do it. Oh, it's the glass and this. And they said, and then they said, okay, we have to give full disclosure. We are a small company, but our only client is Disney. And they worked for Disney World, Disneyland, and they developed exhibits. And so they said, you've got this right. Wow. And then the other one was a vice president of Smithsonian, a guy named Dr. Richard Kern. He came through and he said, he got real quiet as we went through. We spent a lot of time. We spent about 2 hours going through the exhibit, and he got quiet at different point. I was like, oh, maybe he's not enjoying it, because he was like almost like he was taking notes and stuff. And then he got to the end. He said, Smithsonian spent about 5 years creating what's called the Smithsonian touch points for exhibit development, where we're trying to hit all of these key points about emotional appeal, accuracy, depth, character development, all these things. He goes, this is every single one of those points. I just scored this exhibit higher than I've ever scored anything we've ever done at Smithsonian.
Wow.
And I said, oh, wow.
Pretty good.
That's a pretty good thing. So it works. So it's so my job's easier because I get to come in and promote it. And every day tourists come in from all over. So we've been open for 22 years. Year in and year out, we take statistics, we get people to sign in. We look at other factors to see where people came from and why they came. And typically in any given year, about 70% to sometimes 75% of the people who show up at Frontier, Texas are true tourists. They're from out of town. That's different than most museums. It's different than a museum like the Grace, which is an amazing museum here in town. Most museums have that flip-flop where they're kind of serving their local communities, and especially if they're very highly programmatic, they're serving their local communities. And then they happen to get, 30 or 40% of people maybe come from out of town. We were built for tourists. I market us to tourists all these years, and it just works. People come here. And then the thing that's amazing, just like you said, your friend, oftentimes when you look on website like TripAdvisor, which is a website where you review your travel experiences. Ever since that site was developed and we came along, we immediately jumped straight to the top rated attraction in West Texas. And when you read those 5-star reviews, the people who go on the most are often the people who travel the furthest. It's, to be honest, go look on it. TripAdvisor.com, look for Frontier Texas, start reading backwards through the reviews, find someone from a foreign country, and you will find reviews saying, we've traveled all around the world. This is the best museum we've ever been to. Wow. I think it's not the scale of it for sure. There's lots of bigger museums. I think it's the emotional component that they get. It just hits them well. So that works well for tourists. That's worked for us for many years.
You ever been tempted to, well, I shouldn't even put it that way. I'm sure you have done it, where you just, trail along behind a group and just listen to the oohs and ahs?
Oh, so many times, because I've had, reason to. I've needed to give a tour with a group that needed something extra, or just been working through the groups. I get to host a lot of conventions come to town. I'll go greet the group and, make them feel like let them know how much we appreciate them. I'll go through with groups like that. I'll go through with journalists. And so I've watched a lot of people's reactions, and it's been, ever since the beginning, it's been fun. It doesn't get old seeing people every day that come in there and just get amazed by this. Or it's just a good, well done experience.
It's really interesting to watch your engagement in this conversation, because you are passionate and excited and still very much connected to something you've been doing for 20 plus years.
It is interesting. That's a good point, Danny. I'm still feel very, very blessed to get to do what I do. So some days, yeah, it's hard work. I was in the front lawn this morning, down in a ditch at the front, talking with the a contractor about the irrigation system. So sometimes it's not that just very that part of museums. A lot of days it's, is the electricity running, is the plumbing working, all that kind of stuff. But when I get to do that part where I'm dealing with the public or something new right now, curating exhibits.
And what is in the future? What's on the horizon?
So, like I said, most year in and year out, we're a static museum, Smithsonian model, where we don't need to change it because the people who come from out of town, they're traveling cross country or whatever it is. This is their big trip to Texas, and they come and see us and then they go away. And so we didn't need to change things, but really we were missing an opportunity to better serve our locals and people in this region who, might have come 5, 6, 10 times already. And to be honest, that's too much. It's not designed to be, it's designed to be interesting for about 3 visits, maybe, if you really start digging in each layer after layer as you come, but that's really about it. And so in 2016, the board of directors said, well, what's going to be next? What do we want to do? And so we put together a strategic plan looking to 2024, where we were going to have an opportunity to go and renew a local hotel tax that we rely on. That's a specially designated hotel tax that we share with the Expo Center. That was something that we came up with when Frontier Texas was being developed, that Nancy Lyles knew about, that I came in and said, if you'll go get this tax, I'll come take this job. But that tax sunsets at the end of when any bonds related to it are paid off. And so that revenue was going to be going away in 2024. So we knew that in 2024, we needed to put something else in front of the voters. And we knew that was an opportunity to expand, because that legislation requires construction for a tourist related venue. So it's the same tax that those big, huge stadiums that you go to watch the Cowboys or the Houston Texans, things like that, those get paid for by this designated state venue tax. And so we knew there was an opportunity to get some money to build something new. And so we spent a number of years planning on what is it we wanted to. And we identified that we needed 2 basic things. We needed an exhibit hall to be able to bring temporary exhibits and curate temporary exhibits in, so that would be something of interest throughout throughout multiple times a year for our locals. And then we needed a meeting space because we did not have a lecture hall. We didn't have a classroom to be able to. Most museums have a classroom, and we didn't really have that. And so we worked with Rick Weatherall Architects, and they came up with a great design. We went out to the philanthropic community, just to families and businesses, and said, we need to be able to do these things, we need about $4.5 million, and we can get about $2 million from this this hotel tax, and we need about $2.5 million from the private sector. And boy, we talked to everybody. We did all the things that nonprofits do. Danny, you were in the nonprofit world, fundraising, and we raised the rest of that money. And so we built a new exhibit hall. It's dedicated to the honor of two former Abilenians, Jim and Jerry Alexander. They were the people who preserved Fort Phantom Hill historic site. And Jim was a collector of all things related to Fort's heritage and ranching heritage. And his family wanted to honor them, and so made a financial commitment towards paying for part of the gallery space, and then gave us the caretaking of Jim's collection of all these great artifacts. And so we opened that new exhibit space last March, on a very important day in early March. Why would Texans be interested in a day in early March?
Well, I would assume it has to do with the independence of Texas.
That's right.
I don't know.
See, I'm going to throw this. I'm going to throw this quiz thing, pop
should have
quiz on
mentioned the
you.
quiz.
So,
Now
okay,
you're beating me to the quiz.
Okay, so what day on the calendar do Americans celebrate Texas Independence Day? I mean, excuse me, the United States Independence Day.
July 4th.
July 4th. Right, everybody knows that. So Texans should know what day Texas Independence Day, the day that Texans declared their independence from Mexico to throw off a regime that was not honoring their promises, was not protecting them. And that was March 2nd, 1836.
It is March 2nd.
March 2nd.
For some reason, I always have a bit of a dead end in my brain, which my wife would say you have that often. But for some reason, it's the strangest dynamic.
Yeah.
I know it's March 2nd. And in my brain, I want to always say it's March 26th. Well, that's not right.
Well, so people get confused too, because there was a lot of the battles of the Alamo and things that come after that. Yeah. That there's, the days of the siege of the Alamo, and then it takes all the way until April 21st, San Jacinto Day, when it finally gets, when Santa Anna surrenders at San Jacinto. And so anyway, so
you opened on March 2nd.
So we opened the new exhibit, and that was a ranching heritage exhibit, really to talk about the ranching families around here that settled here and are trying to keep those ranches viable in this time.
And these exhibits, they do change. They're not static.
Yeah. And
so you're already into other exhibits.
That's right. Well, so that exhibit, we closed that last month. And so what I've been working on with my staff, my great team, and some other local military historians is this Thursday night, October the 8th at 6:30 p.m., we are going to open a new exhibit called Guardians of the Frontier, the U.S. Army in Texas from 1845 to 1895. And this exhibit will be on display for 6 months, basically, until February.
So that covers the Fort Phantom era, which was 1850s.
Oh, that's right. Good job, Danny.
Well,
yeah,
I visited my friend ChatGPT before you arrived.
All right, good job.
I wanted to get
so it's a fascinating story that I thought I knew, because I've been, doing this Texas Forts Trail tourism promoting for years. Been brought tours out to Fort Phantom Hill.
And but as Deirdre says, you are the king of Taylor County history.
That's it. Yes. It's mostly making fun of me there. She is, but yeah. And so, looking at this history, when we became a state not just because we wanted it as we wanted better protection for Mexico, which was a big part of it. But the United States needed the territory, but they needed it strategically, and they needed our people to join their military is a big part of it. So we're talking about 1845, Texas. At the very end of 45, we become a state, and technically kind of really the beginning of 46. But they had already started moving the U.S. Army into Texas, into Galveston and down to Corpus Christi, because that Nueces River right there was being disputed at that point by Mexico. They were saying that the real border that Santa Anna had agreed to was the Nueces River, not the Rio Grande. So there was this disputed territory between there. And so as soon as we become a state, they immediately move the military down the coast from Corpus down to Brownsville, which wasn't Brownsville at the time. And they reinforce that border. And then over the next essentially year and a half or so, they fight a big time war against Mexico. Interesting thing, I didn't know how important that Texas, played in that. I mean, it was the whole entire operation was based out of Texas. Most of the key commanders were Texans. I mean, there was other ones from outside, but the second level, particularly, lots of Texans involved in fighting that battle against Mexico. And what's at stake is all of the American West, California, Arizona, Nevada, all that would not be the United States if it wasn't for that battle. Interesting thing that right before that, they went to Mexico and said, we just want to make a deal. We just want to buy that territory. You're not even controlling most of that at all. They didn't have any military control over any of that. They didn't even have, the Indian tribes were ruling all of that. And they said, you know what, we'll pay you $30 million for all of those territories. And we'll call it even, and we'll help protect Mexico. We'll be an ally. And Mexico was having a lot of internal struggles at the time, and they couldn't come to terms with that $30 million offer. And so after a pretty rough, war is not pretty, a war, the U.S. Army ends up in Mexico City, takes over Monterrey, then comes in from Veracruz, pushes all the way through the border, and, can basically take over Mexico the rest of Mexico, possibly if they wanted to. And they say, okay, we just want what we asked to buy, and we're still willing to buy it. The price is $15 million instead of 30, because we just spent a lot of money fighting this war. And Mexico said, well, okay. So they signed a treaty, and all of a sudden the United States that we know is settled right then in 1846, even though those territories were still, had to be coming into the Union and things. It was settled right here in Texas. The U.S. Army in Texas played that huge role. And then we just wanted to look at that. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that this year is that the United States is in 2026 is going to be celebrating our 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. I remember when I was a kid, I don't know if you remember 1976 in Abilene, Texas, but Abilene, Texas had the biggest parade and fireworks. I had never seen fireworks, anything like that. To be honest, I don't even know if I'd really seen a fireworks show before the 1976 Abilene 4th of July fireworks out at the Expo Center. But they put on it was a pretty big deal to celebrate the bicentennial, and now we're 250 years in, and I'm just one of those patriotic people who says, let's celebrate that. I'm on a state committee that is called the Texas America 250 Committee that just is looking at what the role Texas played throughout American history. And so the U.S. Army was officially founded on June 14th, 1775. So before the Declaration of Independence, we had formed the American U.S. Army. And so this last, do you know why else, what we call that on your calendar, June 14th, every year you see it on your calendar?
I believe that's Flag Day.
I see you're doing so good on your quiz first. See how I'm turning the tables here? Yeah. It is Flag Day. And so we're in we're in the 250th year of the U.S. Army, and I just wanted this exhibit to honor that. And it just happened to be a lot of the artifacts that Jim Alexander had in his collection that we're taking care of now. It was an easy exhibit to curate from his really great collection.
So as we draw to our conclusion, I want to just ask you, maybe you've been to or are familiar with the really large, I believe it's U.S. Army installation in Fort Richardson out near Jacksboro, Texas. And when you visit that, you are reminded at how at the very same time, America and Texas was advancing and yet so remote.
Oh my goodness.
How did
I have been to
all the logistics involved in all of this boggles the mind.
So we took, so there's a heritage tourism organization that's origins go back to 1968 when Governor Conley was governor, and San Antonio was hosting a World's Fair called the Hemisphere. And they asked the state of Texas for money to host that. And a lot of legislators got together and said, well, what's our region getting out of it if people are just going there? And the governor said, well, we're going to create travel trails so that when people come in for Hemisphere, they can go anywhere in Texas and have a themed travel experience. And they created a trail for the Independence Trail. And the second trail they came up with was the Texas Forts Trail, a 650-mile driving loop surrounding, kind of starting and finishing in Abilene, Texas. In 1998, the Historical Commission took over running that program and was going to give out grants to one of the 10 regions in Texas to start a Heritage Trails program. And everybody around Texas, I was in Plano at the time, and the DFW area was trying to get the grant. And Abilene, Texas won the grant to initiate the Texas Forts Trail Heritage Office. And they hired a young lady named Lisa Sanders, who is now Lisa Perini, Tom Perini's wife. Lisa, she was the first trail director in Texas. And so that program is to promote heritage tourism. And for our region, it's obviously based around the forts. And so I have spent a lot of time at those frontier forts. I was just last week in wrapping up this exhibit, spent most of a day at Fort Concho, right in the middle of San Angelo. Fascinating story, Fort Concho. And then I was down at the tip of our region at Fort McCavitt. And
down near
Menard,
yeah.
Right near Menard. And I had recently before that been to Fort Mason and the Presidio de San Sabin. So we have all these things. But Danny, you're right. Still to this day. Now, occasionally there's a statement of the flag grows the city. And so it was this idea that military bases grew up around forts. And so in San Angelo, that's the case. There was nothing out there. The fort comes, and eventually the town grows up around it. But in so many cases, you go out to these forts like Fort Phantom Hill. It's desolate. It still feels. And
imagine what it was like in the 1850s.
Yeah. And the danger and the risk. And the thing that people think too is that, I bet most of these people just wanted to get away from civilization and live. They wanted to live in uncivilized or, rural. No, most of those people showed up at all these places, including a town like Abilene, with the intention of bringing civilization, grand civilization, with visions of something great. I remember when I was in Fort Worth, reading and hearing a historian talk about the establishment of the fort at Fort Worth up on this bluff, nothing there. And that the first commander comes in and he sets up camp and everything. And then he calls for his wife. And when the railroad, gets there, it was not by railroad. They brought in on covered wagon. You know what she brought with her from the East? She brought a grand piano and everything you would need to have a grand ballroom, because they're not moving out to the West to get away, but to create a new civilization, And so it's fascinating to see that's what's happened. There's towns
which is why when you see these historically accurate dramatic presentations like, not the Yellowstone, maybe the second year was at 1883, it seems, and you see them in the wagon trains, you will see ladies with all of their accoutrements because that was their life, and that's what they were going to be setting up wherever they were headed.
That's right. They weren't going camping.
No,
they were
trying
to create a new world for themselves. And so, so there's a lot of fascinating stories out there. And so
one quick question. I'm gonna ask you a few fun.
You got to get
got to get the trivia here. So, do you ever put on a costume and kind of, pose around in front of your Texas?
Slip in with the holograms?
Yeah, slip in with the holograms and act like a hologram.
I will tell you, the first time I was working late and one of those, I thought everything was turned off. And one of those holograms wasn't. It was the scariest thing. All of a sudden, I look across and there's a hologram just staring straight at me, and they are frightening. We did haunted house there for a few years. That was scary. I have kind of played along in a little bit, but no, I've never jumped into the hologram sets. Maybe that's something that still needs to happen.
All right. Founding of Abilene. I'm going to ask you 1871, 1881, or 1891.
Well, that's easy. That was 1881. And because I was in Abilene for the centennial celebration. Well, and by the way, all the businessmen in Abilene, something very unpopular in the early 1980s, all the men grew beards. Nobody was wearing beards in the late 70s, early 80s, and all the men of Abilene grew beards for the centennial.
Well, I've been growing mine ever since. It's as good as I can do. It's just that's as long as it gets. Okay, we've already established Fort Phantom Hill, 1850s.
Right.
So that I'm not even going to.
1851, 1853.
Can you tell me what Buffalo Gap was called prior to it being officially named Buffalo Gap?
Wow.
Osage of Taylor County, King of Taylor County.
Oh man,
I'm going to give you a couple of options.
Thank you, because I need them.
Yeah. No, was it called Old Town? Was it called Old Taylor? Or was it called Old Goat?
Old Goat. It wasn't called Old Taylor, I don't think.
Old Town.
Old Town.
Yeah. Old Town.
Old Town.
Isn't that funny? But it was called Old Town because it was a bunch of buildings that had the ambiance of kind of the old pioneer, old frontier cabins and stuff.
I don't think that maybe predates people calling it Buffalo Gap. That might have been a name that people were commonly using, because the name Buffalo Gap got stuck pretty early on before there was.
I worded the question poorly, didn't I?
Okay, maybe. I don't know. I'm okay. This is your
dealing
show.
with the Frontier Texas executive director.
I don't know. I'm often not the historian. I'm like I said, I'm in the chair.
But I think you're hunting down the right path here, because I think I did word the question very poorly. I don't think it was actually referred to. I think now that's maybe what people say.
That's what people said probably around the turn of the century.
But it became Buffalo Gap.
Well, it was Buffalo. It was named Buffalo Gap early on. And it was being called that. It was being called that before there was really a town, because
it was the county seat.
And so here's the interesting thing: the town didn't exist when the county was designated in 1858. So there was nothing out here, almost in the entire area. The state legislature in 1858 was just starting to chop up this whole part of Texas. We'd been a part of the biggest county in Texas, which was Bexar County, which includes everything from San Antonio all the way up to here. And they were starting to cut out these new states. And so, new counties. And so they had designated Eastland and Callahan County and Taylor County and maybe one or two more. The legislature to kind of draw on the box. And then it was up to the people to designate a county seat. Well, in 1858, there was nothing here. Nobody established or formally organized a county government at that point. They just let, I believe, Eastland County, you would go to their judge for if you needed something from a county judge. And then the Civil War happens. Not a very functional time for this region, not much going on out here. But then it was, I believe, around 1872 that the county finally organizes, and then they have to designate. And so it was kind of written into the state law that you should choose a county seat as close to possible to the geographic center of your county, unless there's some other exceptional reason. And so that really gave the impetus for Buffalo Gap to grow. And so Buffalo Gap was named the the county seat. And then when the railroad comes through and comes on the very northern edge of the county, the people from developing Abilene go down and steal the county seat from them. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's really is a whole other story.
That's a good story.
Fascinating. So, okay, here we go. Dyess Air Force Base happens to be named for a survivor of the Bataan Death March, William Dyess.
That's right.
Let me ask you, was William Dyess originally from Abilene?
No, he was he was raised in Albany, Texas.
Golly,
you can go visit you can see a historical marker in front of his house there in Albany. Yeah, fascinating story. And he died in a plane crash where his plane went out over one of the cities around Los Angeles, somewhere up there. And the story is that he could have probably landed safely, but would have run over a whole bunch of people. And instead of taking out other people's life to save his own, he ditched the plane and lost his life. Yeah.
I think our heroes from that era, particularly survivors of something like the Bataan Death March, they're just made of a different fabric, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise that he would have sacrificed his life to save others.
Yeah.
Okay. So, don't know how we can just casually move on from such a moving moment, but such a poignant moment in history. But which university began first, Hardin-Simmons or Abilene Christian College?
Oh, Hardin-Simmons was there first, and because
but it hurts me when you just that's easy. Come on, that's a joke.
I'm surrounded by, when you chair the County Historic Commission, I've been going to those meetings for 18 years now, and you're just sitting with people who spend so much time having researched these things. And some of them, it was interesting. When I first went on the Taylor County Historical Commission, there was a woman there by the name of Cherry Gleason. She grew up in the county, born and raised, and she was, I believe, 103 years old, still coming to Historical Commission meetings. We would start not arguing, but debating some point, trying to figure out something. And she was, oh, come on, that was so-and-so family, and this is what it was. And these people married these people, and they own this property. So I just been around those people who really do the hard work of documenting history.
That's pretty fantastic. Somebody who's 103 years old and lived it.
And was still coming to meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last one. Not that it's any, well, I guess it's an illuminating question.
Oh.
There was a company founded in 1889 here in Abilene.
Okay.
That brought electricity to town.
Oh, yeah.
You happen to know the name of the company?
Oh, my goodness. Well, first of all, I'm going to just jump out with their mascot's name, Ready Kilowatt. And that was West Texas Utilities. And that's easy, probably from the sense that I grew up on the north side and I went to church in the center of town, off of. And
you would always drive by.
And so you drive by this smokestack that says WTU on it. And it's right across from me there at Frontier, Texas, that location. And also being a kid who grew up over on the ACU Holy Hill, is joke about it as playing in Eastern Little League. Did you play Eastern Little League?
I did not.
You didn't grow up over there?
I moved from Kentucky to Texas just when I was about to exit Little League age.
Okay.
And I had one summer I could have, and I wished I had.
So anyway, we had a team over in Eastern Little League sponsored by WTU. So anyway, the little Ready Kilowatt character was iconic. Oh yeah. Little light bulb head. Yeah. Little lightning bolt body. And fascinating story. I mean, it was the first electrical plant in this region, and all electrical plants, one of the biggest things they got into the business of was selling ice, because the way to make ice is electricity. And so that was a big business for Abilene. And kind of one of the things that made us a hub for industry was we had electricity. And that was important. And what's interesting is here we are in 2025 building a big data center on the northwest corner of town. The big conversation is electricity. It's still something that we have. In fact, from what I understand, for the data center, was the biggest factor about choosing this location was we were one of the most energy rich locations on the map.
And, it's when I talk to people, we've had the director of the construction project for DPR and the data center here at the podcast. When we talk to people, when she talks to people, one of the biggest concerns is always, what's this going to do to the grid?
Yeah.
And so they're addressing that. And we certainly hope that all the promises of this new technology that will be much more energy friendly and less noisy and all of that's coming.
But what's interesting is Abilene has always been a place that had to work hard for what we get. We didn't just end up with Dyess Air Force Base because somebody in the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. just decided, oh, there's a place on the map. People of Abilene during World War I said, we need to be a part of this defense industry. And they got together and made sure that Camp Barkley happened first. And then after the war, our military affairs committee, just put together all of the efforts and the citizens to make sure we could get the land, promise to protect the area around an Air Force base, and went out and got that Air Force base, and then worked really hard to be good to kind of like landlords almost to the military here. And just all kinds of stories about different things that have happened in Abilene. We don't win the battle because we're the prettiest place in the world. We don't have an ocean, and a port. We don't have a big river. We don't have mountains to put ski resorts on. I think we've had to work hard to be a successful community. And I think that's part of our character. And to be honest, I think that might be the thing that I like most about Abilene is, we have to try. We have to work hard at it. And therefore, we kind of have to rely on each other. And we're just geographically in a place where people, it's not so harsh that you only end up with very, very obstinate people who, like, you go out further west and you start finding a little bit different culture where people aren't as interested in working together. They're much more protective of themselves and keep to themselves. But we just have a really great mix of people who show up here and go, okay, I'm here. I want to contribute.
It's Abilene.
That is. That's what it is.
Jeff Salmon. Great to have you on the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Danny. Appreciate what you do here.
And fascinating. I'm sure you and Jay Moore are colleagues and friends and sit around and talk. And
we don't as much. I love going to his talks because he can pull together strings of things.
And I'm looking forward to inviting Jay on the podcast. But I got to tell you, I think what would sell tickets is to set you two guys up there in your nice big room there at Frontier, Texas, or maybe downtown at the Paramount, and just let you guys sit with a table with a cup of coffee each and just start talking. That'd be fascinating. I'd buy a ticket.
Well, there's so many great people here in this town who have really compelling stories. So I'm glad you're sitting people down and talking to them.
Well, a lot of fun having you here. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us here on Abilene People, the podcast on bigcountryhomepage.com. A big shout out to our producer, Travis Corrigan, TCB, we call him, taking care of business, always doing that on the switcher board. And I thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Danny Sims, and we will be back again with another episode in the very near future. In fact, you probably can click on it just below this one, just about the time you're done watching Jeff Salmon, Executive Director from Frontier, Texas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.